Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at St. Petersburg, which is a board game that dates all the way back to 2014. This is the second edition of the game. It accommodates 2 to 5 players and takes around an hour to play on average. The idea of St. Petersburg is so that we're trying to build up a tableau or engine of cards to get as many victory points as we can. Before I get into the review of St. Petersburg, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK. And if you use my discount code in the show notes, you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get into St. Petersburg. Okay, so a game of St. Petersburg is going to look like this when it's set up, where you have the main board here. And on this board, you're going to have 5 different decks of cards, each relating to a different phase in the game. So you've got the workers deck here, you've got the merchants, you've got the builders, you've got the nobles, and you have these exchange cards as well, which consists of all the different types. Now, you're also going to have these 2 rows of cards, which you can openly draft from. The first of which is going to consist of the cards that have just come out, but later in the game, some cards might get neglected and shift down to the bottom row here, where you can purchase them at a discount of 1. Now, in the second edition of St. Petersburg, you're also going to have this merchants track here, which you are trying to climb to get victory points. So the highest player is going to get X amount of victory points, and the second player is going to get the next amount. And as the game goes on, you're going to use these tokens to increase the points that they dish out. Also, you're going to have these tokens here, which are divided out at the start of the game, depending on the player count. So you're going to divide those up as equally as you can. And that is going to mean that whoever owns these specific tokens is going to be the first player in each of those specific phases. So the objective of this game is to get as many victory points as you can by the time that one of these 5 decks is exhausted. And on each player's turn, you're going to have the option of taking one of 4 possible actions. The first of which is to buy one of these cards by paying the top left-hand value here. The second of which is to reserve a card into your hand so that only you can buy it. And the third option is to purchase that card you've reserved. And the fourth action is to pass. And player will continue taking one of those 4 actions until each player has passed in a row. So one of the key talking points in St. Petersburg is how the game flows and how each of these phases are resolved. Because what you're going to do is that in order, you're going to play through each of these phases, i.e. drawing 10 of these green cards to start with, these worker cards, until the display is full here. And then, in turn, taking those actions till everyone has passed in a row. And then after that, all the worker cards are going to pay out either points or money. And then it's going to go on to the merchants phase. And again, you're going to keep taking turns till everyone passes in a row. Then all the yellow cards are going to pay out. Then you go on to blue phase. Again, keep buying cards or, reserving cards or playing them until everyone passes, and then all the blue cards are going to pay out. So it's quite a methodical way in the way that these cards are resolved. But let's have a look at what you're actually trying to do and aim towards. So essentially, each of these decks work in a very slightly different way, and you're basically building up 2 or 3 types of currencies throughout the game. The first of which is going to be money itself. So all these worker cards are going to offer you a certain amount of money. So let's just say at my turn, I ended up buying this lumberjack here by paying 3. I'm going to add them to my tableau in front of me, and I'm also going to get a discount of 1 coin for every identical card that I have. So I'd actually only have to pay 2 for this lumberjack because I already have one. And again, we're going to keep taking those turns until everyone passes, then all these green cards are going to pay out. So I'd eventually get a £9 cash injection, which is going to be quite nice. So once that green phase is resolved, you're going to go on to the next deck here, and you're going to replenish the tableau, refilling any spaces that were grabbed from the previous round with the next deck of cards. So you can see here I've added 5 yellow market cards to the tableau, and these ones offer you money, just as the green ones do, but they also allow you to climb the market track here. So let's just say I ended up purchasing this fish card here by paying 5. Again, getting any discounts if I had duplicate cards. And then I'd move 1, represented by this symbol, up that fish track here, like so. And again, you're going to keep taking turns until nobody wants to buy any more cards. And you can buy previous neglected cards if you want to. And after that's done, you're going to take your output from the money from the yellow cards. And also you're going to score each of these different goods and where you are on the track. So, at the moment, only the yellow player has climbed up on the fish track, so they would get 1 point, like so. But once that's done, you're going to remove that token, so next time the points are going to increase. And just like before, once you've finished with the merchant phase, you're going to go on to the building phase here. You're going to replenish the tableau back up to 10 cards, and then you're going to go again. Now the blue cards, the building phases here, are always going to offer you victory points or some way of generating victory points. So you can see here, by spending 8, by buying this customs house, at the end of the blue phase, I'm going to get 2 victory points. Or you might get certain different ones like this pub here, where you can end up spending money up to 5 times to get up to 5 victory points. The next deck, these noble cards, are generally more expensive and they offer you a mix of income of money and victory points, but they also offer you end game scoring points based on this sliding scale down here. So if you have, say, 9 unique nobles by the end of the game, you're going to get a massive 45 victory points. Now the final deck here, these exchange cards, are going to be a mixture of all the existing cards. However, these do work in a slightly different way. So you can see here, all these cards are squared off in one of these boxes. And what that means is that these have to replace an existing card by paying the difference. So let's just say I wanted to buy this Winter Palace here. I could do that, but what I would do is I would pay the difference in between this one and a card I've already got in my tableau of the same colour. So this customs house is a value 8, this is a value 19, which is a difference of 11. So I'd only have to spend 11 money in order to replace this customs house with this Winter Palace, which is always going to be an improvement because now this is going to offer me 5 victory points and £2 income. And another difference with these exchange cards is that they do not pay out at the end of the phase. So all the other ones, again, you're going to spend your turns buying, reserving, whatever, and then getting the income from those cards. But these exchange ones, you do not do that. And that is essentially how the game is going to work. But once you've done all of the phases, any existing cards in the tableau are going to slide down to the next row to make them 1 cheaper in the next round. And if they're still there lingering after that, they're just going to get wiped off the board. Also, at the end of the game, you're going to get a number of victory points based on money you have left over. So for every 10 coins you have, you're going to get another victory point. But also for any reserved card you have in your hand, you're going to lose 5 victory points if you haven't built them. Now, something I should mention is that this second edition of St. Petersburg does come with a variety of modules to change the gameplay slightly. I am quite picky with what I've added into the game here, but I think the first couple of modules, this banquet module and this one here, this in good company module, I would always include those ones because they're simply going to add more cards to these decks and they do slightly different things than the standard ones. Now this market here is also an option to play with because the original didn't have this market, and again, much like the other modules, I would always include to play this one because it doesn't really add much bloat or any overhead. Okay, so let's get some thoughts on St. Petersburg. So I have to say, after reading the rulebook for the first time, I was a little bit concerned as to where the gameplay would come from here. And the main kind of catalyst for my concern was the fact that there is only really 2 types of currency that you are managing in your tableau and in your engine. I was kind of concerned that it wasn't going to be enough for me to sink my teeth into. There wasn't going to be enough synergy between the two, or, you'd need more in order to get a more interesting engine going. However, you do start to understand how the flow and pace of the game really do affect the overall experience and the gameplay. Now, the key to this game is balancing your income of money with your income of victory points, which might seem fairly obvious, but there is different routes you can divert down regarding that. So, of course, you want to start spending money to buy new cards, which can actually generate you more money as the game goes on, and let you buy the more powerful, more significant cards that will give you a bigger income. But getting points on your tableau early is important because it gives you more opportunities to extract points from them. Because again, at the end of each of those phases, you are going to get those points. So even if you invest in a small amount of points early, if you do it right from the get-go, that is going to trigger a lot of times and can potentially build up a lot of points by the end. And I really want to stress how much this phase structure affects the game because this really does play a huge factor in the cash flow and the management of your funds, because generally you'll get a huge chunk of cash in the worker phase here from the engine of cards that you've built up, and this will get huge by the end of the game. However, you do need to use that money quite carefully to last you throughout all of the other phases. And it's so easy to get sucked into a bunch of inviting cards that come out, because you might want to use it to spam up the track or do do other things or even just buying points. But generally, you'll find yourself backed into a corner. By the end of these phases here, you've spent all your cash. You've not got much other cash until it gets back round to the worker phase to get your, to replenish your funds. And it will leave you out of pocket for the nobles and the exchange cards. So again, I love how you've got to manage your funds and just resist at times and sit back and think, you know what, who knows what's coming out next? I might need to spend that money more sensibly and I might get more value from it in upcoming phases. I also really enjoy the way that the cards come out onto the display, because it is only ever replenished up to 10 cards. And what that means is that if nobody is really buying anything for the first few phases, then these aren't even going to come out in the first place because there's no room for them to come out on. So again, balancing your funds is so important, because you want to spend it while you have it, but you do want to hold some back. But if you hold too much back, then the new cards from this kind of end of the phases here aren't even going to come out in the first place. I also enjoy the very simple discount system here. Buying duplicate cards or exact identical cards are always going to be one cheaper the next time, or then two cheaper and three cheaper, and that stacks very nicely. And the additional thread of everything slipping down and giving you a further discount here. I find these exchange cards really interesting because you do actually need an existing card to build on top of. But more importantly than that, I love the way that these have a delayed payoff, because this is the only phase here that doesn't offer an instant payout. And if you end up spending a ton of cash here on this card and you replace, say, a noble card, you're not going to get the dividends from that until it gets all the way back around the other phases back to the nobles. I think that 4-action system is fantastic. It makes the game an absolute breeze to explain. Buy a card, reserve a card, play a reserved card, or pass. And the way that reserve system works as well is fantastic, because it kind of gives you a little bit of leeway and a little bit of mitigation to get around your cash flow issues. If there's a card you really want, but you just haven't got the money right now, you can spend your turn to take it for your personal supply ready to be bought later. But as the game goes on, you'll start getting invited to buy new cards, and sometimes you'll forget about the ones you've already reserved. And this added pressure of losing 5 points if you do not end up buying those cards in your hand just adds more weight to that decision. I think I mentioned earlier that I will always play with this market system. I do think this adds a lot to the game, even though at face value, it does seem like a very simple, track climbing exercise. And yes, it is that. But the way that the drafting works in partnership with this adds more meat to the decision, because you are going to have to spend money to climb these tracks. It adds a good level of player interaction as you're trying to be, or at least lead the races here. And if you really do run away with it, as the game goes on, you can start generating a hell of a lot of points for kind of monopolizing this part of the game. Now, I've also brought out some other cards here that work in a slightly different way than the more basic ones I've already shown you. And some of these are from one of the expansion modules, but as I said, I would always add these into the deck. So these purpley cards here, you actually have to spend your turn to take them from the board, and then a future turn, you can play them from your hand. But they work in really interesting ways. Like this money collector here actually means that you spend your turn to take it, but in a future turn you can buy a card for half the amount of price, but you don't get the victory points from them, but it gives you a great way to basically get free money. These orange cards here are great. They allow you to really quickly climb up one of the resource tracks. So you can see this fish one here lets me go 4 up the fish track, like this. And what that means is that, I'm going to be in a really good footing to win that every single round, but it comes with a cost where you have to pay the higher amount of the victory points here, but in money each time to keep hold of that card. And as soon as you relinquish that, you're going to slip back down the track. So you've got to, really weigh up, is it going to be worth it to you? The Potemkin Village ones are also interesting because you buy them for really cheap, but you want to be aiming to replace them with those exchange cards, but you exchange them with the higher value, meaning that the difference is going to get squeezed and make it much more affordable for you. Now, the Black Marker here one lets you go through discard piles. The Golden Donkey just lets you take money from the supply. That one gives you a double turn. You've got the improved workers here, where this one has all the different symbols on them, and the SARS Superstar actually lets you get discounts on other cards as you go out throughout the game. And you've got this chap here who might look a bit familiar. He offers you coins based on how many green cards you have. St. Petersburg plays in around an hour, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And again, it offers a lot of choice and a lot of depth for that amount of time. The game flow is really nice, and the way the game arcs is also decent because you end up building a massive tableau of cards. You're going to have probably triple or quadruple this amount by the end of the game. And when it gets to certain phases and you've invested loads in, say, blue cards, you can really fly up that score track. I've already mentioned the competition that stems from the track climbing. Very simple stuff, but it does add a lot of interaction to the game. You want to be making sure you're always a leg up on your opponent to get those maximum points there, and that can be significant. But generally, just the competition to get to the cards you want is there. What are you going to prioritize? What is going to be best for you? What do you need to get first before somebody else grabs it from you? Are you going to hold back and let someone buy cards that you wanted just so you can buy stuff later? But yeah, this open draft works great, and just a generally good way of embedding player interaction into the game where everything is so inviting. I also feel the game scales very well. I think it's nice to have that third player or so just for the track climbing exercise, but I still think even in a two-player game, you have a bunch of other stuff to focus on in order to build your engine up, and you're mainly going to be focusing on what you're doing. But yeah, I've got no issue at playing this at any single player count, and I'd even stretch to playing it at 5 players, which is quite a rare thing for me to say when it comes to Euro games of this nature. I think the production for St. Petersburg is a bit of a mixed bag. Now, generally the production and the layout of the board, etc., is more of a minimalist approach. It's pretty much just a placeholder for all the different cards and things. But I do like the way that the iconography is clear. There's no fiddliness on the board. There's no kind of no, it's not too busy is what I'm trying to say. Now, what I don't like is the way that some of these characters look. They just look a bit weird, as if their faces have been kind of superimposed on these bodies. But I kind of find it quite funny, and it kind of brings me back to a time when people didn't really care about the way that these Euro games looked. So, I think that's going to turn some people off, but for me it doesn't. I think it's quite funny. Also, a negative is that it does come with paper money, unfortunately, which isn't the best to handle. But generally speaking, I'm not unhappy with the production. The cards are even of a linen finish, so again, quite nice to handle, and they're going to stand up to repeated plays. Okay, so let's get into my final thoughts on St. Petersburg. So again, I want to stress, after reading the rulebook here, I was really having some concerns about this game it's going to be too light, it's going to feel a bit dated, because engine building has really taken off since this game came out. It's a big factor in a lot of modern board games now, especially of the Euro variety. Pretty much every Euro game has some degree or element of tableau building or engine building. And I have to say I was so wrong, and I'm glad to say I was wrong on my concerns about this game, because this is certainly one of those games that you need to play to understand how much this flow of resources matters. So I love the way it's balanced, just 2 simple currencies. You could add the third one in with a market, which I always would do. But it's still, even with the market, it's a very simple system, just balancing those 3 things. Wanting to have money so you can buy new cards, potentially buy more money, but what use is money if you do not have a points engine? So I love that. I love that churning system, and it feels really satisfying when it gets to your best line of cards here, and you get a huge payout. There's some very clever little design points here. The way the cards refill back up, the discount system, again, the cash flow, it all comes together so wonderfully, and it feels like a classic to me. I was very impressed by this one. It's breezy, but it's still thinky. It's satisfying. You can build a great engine, and it's just a hell of a lot of fun. And kind of a hark back to an older classic Euro style game that you can get played in an hour, which I think is quite remarkable. So sadly, I think this game is actually really hard to get a copy of, and I'm really fortunate to have a copy because I've been after this one for a long, long time, and I'm glad I kind of persisted and managed to track a copy down, because this one is not going anywhere from my collection. If I want to play a fun but interesting engine builder, tableau builder, then this is going to be right at the top of that genre. So yeah, really couldn't recommend St. Petersburg enough. I'm sure one day it will get a reprint or be more widely available, because this one is certainly worthy of a shield of quality. And you know what, I even think that in the years to come, this has a lot of potential to climb up my personal rankings, because I think it is so beautifully executed.